Welcome back to Reap Your Roots. I'm your host, Jake Daybell, and today we are going to be talking about the elements. We're going to be looking back to better move forward, looking back at ancient teachings that were used by our ancestors about the elements. Some of you may know what I mean when I talk about the elements. Some of you may be like, what? And what I'm talking about is earth, air, fire, water. There's also other elements and other spiritual ideologies like wood or metal or ether is one as well. But I'm really just talking about these four elements, the four most basic building blocks of our reality. And mentioning spiritual traditions, wisdom traditions, across all of them, across all of the beliefs of our ancestors, elements were very important. In Chinese medicine, even their physical health and their organs are tied to elements and their progression. In yoga and yogic sciences, their chakra system is tied and very related to the elements. In Celtic and Nordic indigenous peoples, our ancestors there, they had their whole pantheons that were related to the elements. Same with Greece, ancient Greece, same with ancient Rome. Everywhere, indigenous people in the Americas obviously worked and related very heavily with elements. And it's something that we don't do today. In our modern era, we're not taught about the elements, we're not taught about nature, we're not taught to really be in a relationship with nature, that's even possible. And we're actually taught that we can just use and abuse it. You know, this subconscious programming that we're getting has nothing to do with the relationship or sacredness of the earth. And it's very damaging for our society. Put all politics aside, all preconceived notions. When you look back at history, when we look back to better move forward, we see that everyone in history had right relationship with nature, with Mother Earth, with the elements. And I've done other podcasts about, for example, plant medicine. We've done other podcasts on just nature, Mother Nature as a whole, and benefits that nature gives us. But on this one specifically, I wanted to talk about the elements and how we can use the elements in our modern world with our present day problems for our benefit. It is probably the most applicable thing in all of my studies and trainings, everything that I've done. The elements and the teachings around the elements is the most applicable thing that I have learned. And it's one of the most helpful. And it's because unless I'm stuck in a room fasting and without water all day, then every single day I'm going to be around the elements. I'm going to be in contact with the elements. If I'm breathing, I'm in contact with the air. If I go outside, with the wind. If I feel the sun, I'm in contact with a version of fire and the fire in my belly and my motivation and my drive. If I am walking outside, I'm obviously with the earth. I'm on this earth. And same with water. If I'm drinking water, then I'm in contact with water and I'm working with water in this way. And all of these things that I just mentioned are ways that I can either consciously work with elements and be in a right relationship with them, or I can just unconsciously be in relationship with them. So that's one really important thing. Everybody has a relationship with the elements. We actually are dependent upon them. It's how we live. It's the air we breathe. It's the water we drink. It's the earth that brings forth all of our food. The sun and the fire and the heat that the sun brings. All of the elements are essential for our existence. And we don't think about it. We don't have relationship with the elements. We don't even give thanks for these elements. That is something that is completely eradicated out of Western society and out of this modern world. So today, I wanted to talk a little bit deeper about the elements and how to use them. How specifically you can start building a relationship with them and start to benefit from a from reciprocity, right? It's not using them necessarily, but it's being aware of them and having them as your ally for your physical, mental, emotional, spiritual well-being. And specifically today, I wanted to talk about mental and emotional well-being and something that I'm creating right now. It's called the Elemental Blueprint, and it is something that is what I would say, humbly, inspired. Very, very, very inspired and very impactful. It's a curriculum and a idea that is coming through me that is helping me in so many ways and how I can actually build a relationship with the elements. And even with my clients and within my communities, it has started to give real instantaneous results in people's lives to have a better mental and emotional health. So I'm going to give you high level what this elemental blueprint is. Well, first off, where it starts is a quiz. It's a 10-question quiz that I can send you. If you're interested, just hit me up, let me know. But what I have done within this framework is I have tied 4 of the most common emotions to the 4 basic elements. So I've tied fire with anger. I've tied water with sadness. I have tied earth with loneliness. And I've tied wind or air with stress and worry. So these 4 emotional states are, from my experience working with people and just my own life, they're the most common emotions that give people a difficult time, that people have a difficult time with. They're emotions that are often considered quote unquote negative. They're emotions that people often try to stay away from or try to fix or try to solve. And my idea is that we're not supposed to be trying to fix or solve something that naturally happens within us. And my idea is that you actually can't get rid of any of these 4 emotions. There's nothing to get rid of. And so pairing them with the elements in this way, it really automatically starts to cue us into how they're natural. The elements are natural. They're a natural part of this world. And these 4 emotions are a natural part of our inner world. Anger, sadness, loneliness, and stress. Those 4 emotions. And it's really genius, this idea of pairing them with these elements, because each of these elements, I'll explain this a little bit further on, can help us actually use and alchemize these emotions for the greater good, for our benefit. Consider these elements as basic mental emotional medicine or prescriptions that can soothe these emotions, that can transmute these emotions to serve us. And there's a process to teach that I'll teach here in a little bit that allows us to do exactly that. But before I get to that, let me talk a little bit about how pairing these elements and these emotions, give you a visual of how these emotions can get out of balance, just like these elements can get out of balance. So for example, a fire. A fire isn't inherently bad, and fire is paired with anger. Anger isn't inherently bad, but when a fire gets out of control, when it spreads too fast, when it becomes a wildfire, then it can cause a lot of destruction. That's the same thing with our anger. Anger, presenced or experienced or felt, isn't necessarily bad. It's what happens when we become reactive and that anger starts to spread like a wildfire. It starts to destroy relationships. It starts to even destroy people's lives because it can spread when it's not contained like a wildfire. Trying to contain it, trying to hone it in. The second visual is sadness. Sadness and water. Obviously, not inherently bad. Sadness can feel a lot of times like we're drowning, like we're just trying to keep our head above water, like waves are crashing down on us, especially in people who have experienced like a chronic depression or very intense high levels of sadness. This can feel like you're drowning. And there's a way to work with sadness, to work with water in this way where you can actually begin to float. And you can even actually begin to still the water. Imagine it like a still lake. There's a lot of teachings out there, especially from Asian cultures, that talk a lot about how you need to flow like water. And it's always about movement, right? Flowing with the sadness, flowing with your feelings, flowing like water. And that's good. We teach a lot of that within this elemental blueprint. And there's also a deeper teaching within, or I guess I'll just say a different teaching within a specific branch of samurai Zen Buddhism. And this teaching doesn't necessarily focus on the flowingness of the water, because that can add still a lot of turmoil and a lot of like you're in the waves, you know, you're not in conscious control. But they teach it as a still lake. And we do a lot of meditations and visualizations within the elemental blueprint to help people have their sadness be there, but have it be calmed and steady like a still lake across their mind and across their body as they have that experience of the emotion of sadness. Earth is loneliness. Earth being loneliness, the comparison that I made was like being stranded in a desert. There is no other emotions. You're kind of numb when you're lonely or when you feel loneliness. You're just stranded in a desert. You have no connection. You have nobody around you. And this is okay to be alone. It's okay to be not with anyone, but it can get, especially after a long time being stranded, very dangerous for the mental emotional world. So it's really important pairing it with earth, and I'll teach later kind of the solution on how to get out of the loneliness or how to not be stranded essentially in the desert or on earth. And then the fourth being air, stress, worry. That visual that I got was one of tornado, right? It's like when we're in our minds and we're stressing and we're worrying, the thoughts are just going and going and going, and we start to spiral. Right? We start to ruminate in our emotions and in our thoughts as well, and this creates a tornado. Now, air is, like I've said, with all these elements, very natural and very useful, very beneficial. Same with stress. It's very natural, and it actually can be very useful. But when it becomes out of balance or out of our conscious control, out of a conscious relationship with it, then it begins to be spirals out of our control and become like a tornado. So now that you've got these four elements with these four emotions, you get kind of big picture, the view of what this elemental blueprint is and the teachings of our emotions, which I'm pulling much from Jungian depth psychology and other things that I've studied and that I teach. And then I'm pairing it with a lot of indigenous arts teachings, which also I've apprenticed in and learned a lot in that way. So I'm blending these two worlds of the indigenous arts and the depth psychology into one to make it very useful and very applicable for our day. Wanted to talk a little bit about the mental mechanisms that we usually use for uncomfortable feelings or, like I said, negative emotions, thoughts that we don't want to have, that we're trying to get away from and put into our shadow. These four mental mechanisms are very common across the board for everybody. I'm sure that you're going to relate to them. And one of my favorite quotes I wanted to mention is by Gabor Mate. He is amazing, but one thing that he says is that it's not about feeling better. This isn't why we do this work or therapy or whatever you want to call it, progression. It's not about feeling better. It's about getting better at feeling. And this insinuates what I was just saying earlier about how your problems aren't something to fix. They're not, your demons are not something to fight. Anything that you're trying to fight is going to fight back. Anything you resist is going to persist. So we can't get rid of them. It's a natural thing that happens within us. It's not about feeling better all of the time. It's just about getting better at feeling and dropping in to actually the feeling. That's when we become in conscious relationship with it, and then we can actually gain back our ability to choose, rather than just living in reaction, living off of, unconscious or subconscious programming and impulses. It's about leaning in to the discomfort of our emotions and then integrating them, not rejecting them, but integrating them. These 4 mental mechanisms are the most common ways in which we try to reject them. We try to get rid of them. The first one is suppression. Suppression, really self-explanatory. If you're suppressing something, you're pushing it down, right? If you're feeling anger, you suppress it, you bottle it up. If you're feeling sadness, you numb out. Then the next one is escape. And escape is where most addictions come from. Addictions aren't about the substances. Addictions are about the emotions, the pain that we're not wanting to feel. So escaping them through, alcohol, pornography, even something like social media or eating, binge eating. All of these ways are ways in which we escape feeling. So suppression, escape. The third one is exploding or expression. This is when we're not avoiding it, we're not distracting ourselves through escapism, but it's actually just always at the surface and we're exploding a lot of the times. This one's very common, very, very common for stress and also for anger, for these two emotions. When we're stressed out all the time, you can tell when you're really stressed out, and it's very obvious in the way that you're speaking, in the way you're conducting in your behaviors. Same thing with anger. Exploding or expression is one that when people are commonly told that they have anger issues, it's because they're using this mental mechanism to deal with their anger a lot, which is the explosion. And then fourth and final is rumination. Rumination is super common, especially when tied to wind or tied to worry and stress. When we're ruminating, right? We're just ruminating and ruminating and ruminating on the feeling. It's also sadness. If you're in chronic depression, you're ruminating in sadness. You're just stuck essentially in a thought-feeling loop. You feel the feeling, it causes more thoughts, that makes you more sad and feeling, which causes you more thoughts to be sad about, and you're stuck in this loop. Your emotions become very sticky, and you can't get out of them because your rumination is your mental mechanism that you are using. So what's awesome about this elemental blueprint, now that I've given you a high-level overview, is it's only 10 questions. And you answer the 10 questions, and you go through the 4 elements, figuring out which element or which emotion is most common for you, most common in your field and in your feeling. And then it's also going to help you find out which mechanism is your most used mental mechanism. And then the journey from there, once you've identified the patterns, once you've identified the emotional homes or the emotions that you're most comfortable with, that are most common within yourself, then it's about the practices and the way forward. And we always start with that most common emotion, but the goal is to get to obviously all 4 emotions, all our emotions. But we start with that most common one, and then we also start with the most common mental mechanism, how to not rely on that mental mechanism and actually have practices in which you can do to feel these emotions, because you cannot transcend what you refuse to embrace. You have to allow, you have to welcome them, you have to open up and allow the emotions, and then you can transcend them or transmute them, alchemize them for the greater good, for your greater good. And I teach a framework within my Brotherhood, Deep Roots Brotherhood. I also teach a framework with my one-on-one coachings that's just 3 phases. It's how to actually do this. These practices all fit within this framework. And the 3 phases are emotional awareness, actually feeling what you're feeling and allowing it in and getting back in connection. Remember, right relationship with those emotions, with those elements. The second phase is emotional resilience, which is allowing more of those emotions in once you've connected to them, allowing them more so that you can increase your capacity to feel them. You can feel more of them at the same time. This is also called increasing your window of tolerance. You're able to stay within a window of tolerance, feel a lot, and not get overwhelmed or not have to revert back to a mental mechanism. And another way to explain emotional resilience is emotional intelligence. Emotionally intelligent people aren't just good talkers or business people. Emotional intelligence is having an awareness of your emotions and then having the ability to expand that window of tolerance. And then the third step, the third phase, is emotional alchemy. Once you're feeling them, once you're able to feel a lot of them, your capacity is increased, then that third and final phase is you can alchemize them for your benefit. You can actually take back your ability to choose what to do with that emotion, where you want to send it. Viktor Frankl says, actually I think this is Nietzsche, but then Frankl talks about it in A Man's Search for Meaning. He says, between stimulus and response, there's a gap. And within that gap is our choice, our freedom of choice. And if we can emphasize and choose within that gap, then that is what will lead to our freedom. So stimulus, response. Stimulus is somebody triggers you, or the emotion comes up within you, whatever emotion it is. And then the response is doing whatever the mental mechanism is, right? Usually it's automatic. We're trained. Our neural pathways are trained. They're whatever fires together, wires together. So it's just going to do what it does. If we can emphasize that gap and really, like I said, become emotionally aware that there is a gap, become emotionally resilient by expanding our ability to choose in that gap, which is the emotional alchemy. And these deep inner alchemy teachings are something that will make you a master of mind, body, and soul, but especially the focus of today is this mental world that we have in our heads, this emotional world that we have in our beingness. We will be able to be the conscious creators of our experience on the mental and emotional level through these three phases. And this elemental blueprint makes it such a simple, easy, applicable, practical way in which you can do this again and again and again until your new automatic response is what you choose, rather than just these four mental mechanisms that we have relied on for so long. So yeah, it's like that. And if you're wondering where to get this elemental blueprint, hit me up, comment on this video, message me on any of my socials. I want to give this elemental blueprint for free to everybody. So if you're interested, just let me know and I'll send it to you. And if you're interested in deepening after you take it, if it's something that really resonates with you, then the invitation is step in to my world, step into my orbit. Let's connect. Whether it's you're a man that's dealing with these four emotions and you need a community, a brotherhood. We have a brotherhood, the Deep Roots Brotherhood, that is focusing on emotional and mental mastery and our purpose and our visions, but we start really with those roots, right? Of actually gaining conscious control of our lives and figuring out how to lead ourselves. And then we can figure out how to lead others and build everything that we're trying to build. And if you're not a man, but you're still interested in this stuff, Gnosis Rising is the other community that my wife and I do. And it's all about nature-based methods and earth-based spirituality. So this elemental blueprint is also in there, and you can join there. And also, of course, pending, I do coaching and programs throughout the year, but the communities are really the place to start. Start building that relationship with Reap Your Roots, with me. And yeah, I hope that this benefited you. I hope that you have comments and questions. Hit me up if you do. And please, will you just please remember to keep smiling.